Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of Referee Timeout. I am Bob Swisshelm. I'm a USA Pickleball certified referee and a member of the APP head ref team.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Mike Baumgartner, Director of Officiating for the APP Tour and also a USAP certified referee.
And this is an immediate continuation of episode 11 because we end up having so much fun talking about this stuff. It takes longer than we necessarily plan. But we are currently in the midst of talking about what is the referee doing during the serve. And we talked about the beginning portion of the serve, but now we're at the point where the serve is the score has been called and the player is getting ready to serve. The serve, sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit, but the referee is focused on the server, and the server is now getting ready to hit the serve. What types of things are we looking for now, Mike, on that at that server?
As the referee, I'm looking at the server. Okay, first of all, and we talked about this in our episodes, right? So, where are their feet? Are their feet in the correct position prior to the striking of the ball? And then also, have they changed foot position while they're striking the ball? I encourage you to go back and listen to a prior episode about where the feet should be and how the feet should react during the serve. So we're also looking for, hey, are they doing a volley serve or are they doing a drop serve? Which one are they doing? Because obviously, and we've described in previous episodes again, go back and take a look at them if you haven't watched them. But there are certain rules and regulations associated with the volley and the drop serve that are pretty much completely different. So these are
So,
the things we're looking for.
so how does the referee, I mean, you've described two distinct areas on the server that we have to pay attention to. One is their feet way down on the ground, and the other is their body. How do we do that at the same time?
Yeah, for a referee, it can become quite difficult. If we're using a dual referee system, one referee is watching the feet, one referee is watching the torso or the body or the arm movement associated with the volley serve and the drop serve. For me, Bob, I watch during warm-ups and I understand during warm-ups what type of serve action that each player may have, and is there something that I should really focus on a little bit greater than I normally would when they're serving as a referee. So it can be quite difficult. There's a lot to watch, but it's not impossible.
Right. So I like what you said there, Mike, because what we're each doing as a referee, experienced referees, will evaluate each individual player to determine the things that are they're most at risk of in terms of doing a fault. And for each player, that will be the thing that we tend to focus on, not to the exclusion of all else, because
Right,
you do need to
right.
balance back and forth. Now, and I find when I don't have a dual ref, number one, having a dual ref is awesome because then you can focus on one particular activity. But if not, I find it difficult to focus on both of those in any particular serve. So I will make a choice to alternate back and forth. It's like, okay,
Mm.
I'm looking at their feet and I realize that okay, that's not really at risk. The next serve, I'm going to be looking at their body motion, and then if they're doing a volley serve, I'm looking to see what portion of their which service motion they might be at most risk at. And I could ask you this question, but it's a kind of a leading question that I don't remember we've discussed. But I've noticed as well, and this is frustrating as a referee, is that sometimes the angle that you are looking at the player has a distinct impact on our ability as a referee to detect whether or not, say, for example, they're striking above the waist.
Yeah.
If I'm looking through their arm to their body, that's a different perspective than if I'm looking through their body to their arm. And so, if I have a questionable serve, sometimes I will not really know for sure until either the end change or until the second game when I'm looking at them from both sides.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct there, Bob. As a head referee, when I walk around and watch matches and I see something, from one baseline looking at the other baseline, and I think, wow, that person looks like they're stepping on the line when they're striking the ball, but the referee's not calling it. Well, that referee has a much better angle to that baseline than what I do, because the referee's standing at the post. I'm all the way at the back fence looking at it from, all the way across the court. And then when they change ends, like you just mentioned, that's when I have a better opportunity to see if, in fact, that they're stepping on that. Because players are very consistent where they stand during the serve, right? And if they weren't faulting at the other end, and I thought they were, and then now I see that they're actually not. There are times they do, right? But it looked to me like every time they were, and then when they switched ends, every time they
Yep.
weren't.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it just reiterates your point of an angle makes a big difference for a referee. But because of that, Bob, what do we have in the handbook or the rules that allows us to kind of warn the player of
Right.
what could
And I used the
may be
word
happening?
earlier, and then that
Yeah.
is questionable, right? So we as a referee have the responsibility for assuring that the service motions are legal. And until a year or two ago, we basically either would allow it or we would fault them. And we always told ourselves that we had to be 100% sure, and that is still true, that we want to be 100% sure that a fault is a fault before we fault them, before we force them to lose the rally. However, a couple years ago, the rules committee, in their infinite wisdom, and in this case, I do think this was a wise choice, they
Mm.
gave us, the referee, a tool that we could say, because truthfully, if there's any one thing that I think people complain about, it's how can the referee let that illegal serve go by, right?
Mm.
And we've talked about the complexity there, but we now have the capability or the ability to be able to say it's questionable whether or not you struck the ball above the waist or you struck in an upward motion, or the paddle is below the wrist. And so we recognize amongst ourselves. We're not saying you did it, but it's possible that you did it, and we have a responsibility for assuring that it doesn't happen. So we're not going to fault you, but we're going to make you do it over again. So
Hmm.
we have the option. If it is questionable, we can use questionable to say stop play. It's questionable whether or not something or other, and then we're going to have you
Yeah.
do a reserve.
And I'm glad you use the word option, right? Because it's not required that we do that. We can call
Correct.
a fault right away. Remember, we're 100% sure when we call the fault. So it's an option. It's not, we don't have to give you the questionable weather before we actually call the fault when you do it again. That's
Right.
correct.
Right.
So it's an option. Please remember, players, it is an option or a tool in the referee's toolbox to allow you to understand that you're potentially very, very close to committing a fault.
Right. Another way to say that is if you're certainly fault, you're going to get called for a fault. Say, for example, you
Mhm.
did an overhand serve,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. There's
It's
no
obvious
question
to
there.
everybody there's no question that that's a fault, and you are going to get faulted. Occasionally, not so much on that, but other types of faults or warnings, the player will say, "Well, don't you have to give me a warning first?" And the answer is absolutely not. If we are
Absolutely not.
100% sure, boom. The other thing is that when you talk about referees, that the use of questionable is we have many religious discussions about that. Some referees will say, I know when I see an illegal serve and I'm going to call a fault. That's fine. And they say, and if I know that if I don't see it, I'm not going to even use questionable. That's
Right,
also fine.
right.
Now, the side effect of that is for that particular referee, sometimes the spectators will say, oh, that serve that looked to them from their perspective that it was illegal. Now, I can tell you that that experienced referee knew for a fact that it wasn't, because there have been so many times people say, "Hey, look at this video. Look at this video. That's an
Yeah,
illegal
yeah,
serve." And we
yeah.
slow it down. We show them even the video shows that it's not illegal. So go away.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yes. So those are again that particular aspect of the serve is, in my mind, one of the most challenging things to do as a referee, because I'll use a phrase, I may get a verbal warning from Mike. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't as a referee, right? We need to make
No
sure that
verbal
we
warning from me because that's true.
yeah, we need to make sure that we are focused and that we understand what we're looking for and how to look for that. But we need to trust what we see. And basically, ignore complaints. Mike, how many times before the match has a player come up to you and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
you need to watch so and so serve"? How do you
Oh,
respond to that?
I'm watching everyone serve all the time. So, how many times does that happen? More often than not.
And it's interesting the responses that you'll get from the referee because we talk a little bit about this, but some of the referees will get defensive. Well, don't tell me to do my job, how to do my job,
Yeah,
blah blah blah.
yeah,
Some will do, I'm watching every serve. I tend to be, thank you, and I
yeah,
will, I mean, it is a piece of information that potentially. Along the same lines. The other thing that happens is that my friends, since they know that I'm a referee, will often ask me to evaluate somebody's serve in rec play. And they'll say, well, can you look at their serve to see if it's illegal? And I'll say, well, what is it? What exactly is it that
yeah.
you think is illegal? Because
Mhm.
what I'm doing is I'm testing to see whether or not they understand what the rules are. And
Right.
and I don't know, it just looks illegal, or I don't know, I can't return the serve,
I can't
therefore it must
return
be
it, so
illegal.
it's got to be illegal.
Yeah.
That's right. I love that.
So
I've used that before.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and we've talked about the service motion, those, but we're also looking at how they're managing the ball, right?
Yeah,
When we talked earlier about the volley serve, you can throw the ball up, and there will be a little bit of spin rotation or spin on the ball. But if we can see the holes as it's spinning around, we're not going to end up saying that, well, gee, you put spin on the ball. Same type of thing when you're releasing the ball on a drop serve. We're trying to see whether or not Mike commented on whether or not their fingers are extended as their hand is following the down, all that type of stuff. So there's a heck of a lot going on during that service motion. Okay,
in a very small amount of time,
a
right?
very very small amount of time, right? So uh, have we talked here about the concept of sometimes we delay until the second game or when we change ends? We already talked about that here, didn't we?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
good. Okay.
Because we talked about the angles, and how you may not see something from one angle, and then you put it in the back of your head as a referee. Okay, when they change ends, I'll take a look at it again.
Right.
You know. So
I find it interesting. One of the things I really like about refereeing is it does require focus throughout the entire match. We may or may not look calm to you, but we're relatively stressed, right? Because we know that there's so many different things that we have to focus on, and we need to maintain that focus throughout every rally, every game, all that type of fun stuff. I personally find that the service is one of the most stressful things because of all of these things that we've talked about. And so I have to remind myself, okay, the serve is done, and I can't just sit back now. Now I got to be looking at, okay,
right.
who's close to the line and the non-volley zone line, all that kind of stuff. It's just you're moving on from one type of focus to another type of focus.
Yeah. So Bob, you're a lot like me. You're stressed because you care, right? You're
Yes,
trying to do
yes.
what's best, and you're trying to make it a fair experience for all the players on the
Right.
court.
And I
So
think
there's
we've
nothing wrong with
commented
being
about,
stressed.
yeah, we've commented about this before. My firm belief is that professional, high quality referees are not interested in inserting themselves into the game.
No.
I will say when I first got started, it's like, well, I want to make sure that I can do this. I want to have a foot fault. I want to have a player out of position. But once you kind of get past that point of knowing that you are there and that I could call it if I needed to, and I will call it if I need to, I don't want to call it, right? I don't need to hear myself speak. I don't need to get in. I don't need to make a call on that type of stuff. We don't want to, but we need to be prepared. And that's why we stay focused throughout that time. All right. I think we're done. We're talking about referee focus. We've talked about the serves. We've talked about the second ref and what they're doing. Anything else on any of this, Mike? You think we're done?
No, I feel like we've covered this quite well, and
All
we're
right.
actually at the amount of time that we want to be at. So
Okay.
I
And
think we're in good
the
shape.
next and the final topic that we're going to talk about in the next podcast is the concept of what do we as referees think that you as players should be doing as you are preparing yourself to either serve or receive. And so that's going to be our next topic. Remember, please like this episode and also subscribe to our podcast so that you get notified when we post new ones. I'll see you
Yeah.
guys on the court. Mike, any last comments from you?
Yeah, hey, thanks for joining us, everyone. And again, feel free to reach out to us at refereetimeout@gmail.com with any suggestions on what we're doing here.
Yep.
We're
Referee
open to
dot
listening to
timeout.
everything.
Yep.
Yep, sorry, referee.timeout@gmail.com.
All right.
Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.